Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel. My name is Amber Cobb. I'm Director of Partnership for RIoT, and this is my first RIoT as a member of the team, and I'm really excited to be moderating this panel. For those of you who don't know, RIoT is an IoT focused on economic development, nonprofit, with an early stage startup accelerator, a hardware prototyping and co-working space, and over 9,000 members and 80 sponsors. Today, our panel is going to be talking about getting products to market during social distancing. We'll discuss how companies are tackling the challenges of development and what technology challenges may lie ahead. I'd like to run over a few ground rules for our panel. Everyone's microphones will be muted during this time, and our amazing Caroline Griffin, RIoT's Operations and Events Manager, has kindly offered to monitor the Q&A window, so please feel free to submit any questions, and we'll do our best to get to them at the end of the discussion. As a reminder, the webinar will be recorded, and everyone, again, will be placed on mute. We'd like to thank RIoT sponsors. I think we skipped over that slide, or I wasn't paying attention, so excuse me for that. But let's introduce our panelists. Erin Mulder is CTO with Chariot Solutions. Chariot Solutions is an IT consulting firm specializing in software development, systems integration, mobile application development, and training. He's been with Chariot since 2002. And when I asked him what his hobby was, he said that he is working on a browser app for laying out 3D printing jobs. Next up is Rick Chuvalo. He's CEO and founder at Pica Product Development and Affiliates. As you can imagine, as CEO, Rich wears many hats, but works on product development and operational design. When I asked Rich for his fun facts, I think he may have given me the best response. And he said, and I quote, "I formally trained as a chemical engineer, and I wish I had paid more attention to my basic EE classes almost 40 years ago." I think a lot of us probably feel that way. Next up is Chris Lamb. Chris is CTO and co-founder of Device Solutions. Device Solutions is an engineering and consulting firm. Chris's fun fact is that in his spare time, he volunteers with an organization called Black Star Energy, which develops microgrids for remote villages in Africa. Gilles Philion is the Director of Sales for Nemko Canada. As Director of Sales, Gilles is responsible for a world-class sales team with over 20 years experience in the regulatory, international approvals, and product integrity fields. He's a hand-on regulatory expert. And last but not least is Mike Laut. He is CEO and founder of Laut Designs. As Laut Designs is best described as a product and brand design firm. As CEO, Michael explores, sets, and communicates the direction of Laut Design. His fun fact is that he also, in his spare time, is an adjunct professor in the College of Design at North Carolina State University. So thank you all for being here to have this discussion with us around product development. So let's dive right in. I'll direct this first question to Erin and Chris. The environment around product development has always been a dynamic one, with technology changing during the design cycle, decisions being made on the fly. Is there a new strategy to employ when working completely virtually with a remote product design team and customer? And are there any new technologies or innovations you've integrated? Erin?
Yeah, I mean, as software developers, we've had tools for working remotely kind of forever, but the design phase is much more of a challenge. We're used to getting a bunch of people in a room with a whiteboard and devoting a couple of days to getting something off the ground, and then sitting with users and watching them go about their daily routines, and kind of all of that is out the window. We've relied a lot on Miro, which is an online whiteboarding tool, kind of a collaborative whiteboarding tool. We've tried to break up design sessions a little more so people aren't sitting in front of a Zoom call all day long. We've taken advantage of recording in some cases when people are willing to, so we can have something to refer back to other than our own kind of hasty notes. So we're trying to do what we can, but it is a different environment. It's kind of more limited environment than what we're used to for product design.
Absolutely. Chris, what are you guys seeing over at Device Solutions?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for this opportunity to participate. It's an interesting new challenge here, the online forum. So first, kind of referring to your question, I don't think that the strategy has necessarily changed that much. You still have to focus on the key issues and challenges and processes you always did. Managing change, minimizing feature creep, figuring out what the minimum viable product is, and getting to market quickly and with the desired features. But the tactics kind of changed a lot, especially for those of us who work a lot with the hardware. Um, we're used to getting together, maybe not quite as much in a big design group or whiteboarding, but doing quite a bit of debugging and hands-on work together. And no longer as a CTO can I just wander around and drop in on the engineers, look for the overly furrowed brows or hallway conversations going down paths that are going to be kind of a disaster. So it requires a lot more checking in and communications and keeping up with things. And luckily, this didn't happen, 2 or 3 years ago, because things like Slack and Teams and Zoom or WebEx were not as mature and reliable and ubiquitous as they are today. So that's really been very, a great thing, very convenient, and allowed us to transition fairly seamlessly to working offline. I spend a lot more time sort of chatting and videoing with everybody, trying to keep up and encouraging them to reach out when it might not be as obvious since they're not in the same room with people. And we spend a lot of time coordinating and planning ahead. But most of our design software guys are available remotely. Our documentation, our software, our embedded software, it's all the same. So it's really just trying to stay ahead, mitigate the risks, and focus a little bit on the safety and things like that as well. There have been a few challenges around suppliers, fab and assembly, but most of that is even resolved. There are just a few components now that are still hard to get. For example, infrared thermometers. They're being used for other things now than IoT devices.
I'm sure. And, I think we all have an opportunity to thank those companies that are making this virtual workplace possible, and certainly our internet service providers. Have any of you seen any challenges or differences when the people involved in a product design can't go hands-on with prototypes?
We definitely have. We've been shooting more videos of walkthroughs of things and creating more animations digitally than we used to, which is kind of cool because it gives our team a chance to flex those muscles that they don't necessarily use as often. But we, in a similar way, were set up to do a lot of that remote work before this. Fortunately, that, as Chris said, wasn't possible even as recently as a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. Michael, to tag on to that, at Laut, you all focus on brand design as well as product. Has your team had to make any changes to your workflow, or have you implemented any changes that kind of go along with this new normal we're experiencing?
Sure. So we have a team of 13 here, and it used to be that we'd meet each morning first thing for as short as 5 minutes or as long as an hour, depending on what was going on. And we've had to split that into two individual teams that meet at the same time, and obviously it's virtually. So that's been a shift to getting all of that organized and trying to host a thing with multiple people's microphones and videos every day like this. So that's been one of them. And then a lot of our outreach and a lot of our sales efforts and things like that have been focused on a lot of our customers that are still very, very busy right now. And we've got some whose business actually increased because of this, which has been sort of fascinating to see. But because what we do here is hands-on, and because of the defense work that we do, we technically are considered essential during this. So it's been sort of a decision-making process on my part to send our team remote whenever possible and only pull people in when we absolutely have to.
Excellent. This next question, I'd like to talk to Rich and Gilles. Oftentimes, a product under development will need to go through an external validation, as well as regulatory testing. Rich, from a manufacturing and supply chain perspective, how has your process changed through the COVID-19 crisis? Have you seen significant changes on the supply side, and are they starting to even out?
Well, it's really best way to describe it is it's been a wave where we initially had issues with components and sub-assemblies or whatever that we have to procure from Asia. And that's where the virus hit first. And we had extended shutdowns of factories after Chinese New Year's because the virus hit after that. And that was kind of the first wave. And then another wave has become shipping from Asia as some of the capacity was handled on commercial flights. We're seeing delays in shipping. And in our internal facilities have been the last wave that we're dealing with now. So, you know, and we're considered essential because we do quite a bit of medical work. But you know, we've done the same thing that the previous speaker said is probably half our staff is working remotely. But some people are, you know, have to be there to make actual product in our internal facilities. And it's a challenge that's coming through in waves.
Have you had to make any changes during this whole process with how you're getting the supplies?
Not only getting them, but also with what we do once we get them. Like our manufacturing facility, we've set up cells in a way that multiple people aren't handling the same product on the same day. We'll let things sit, and you know, we've taken precautions in our factory and our manufacturing facility. As far as getting materials from our suppliers, you know, there's things roughly take twice as long now as they used to. So everything just moves slower with what's happened. So it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Gilles, how do you handle the roadblocks with testing when you can't have on-site support from your customer's team? Has Nemko made any pivots or innovations to deal with these new obstacles?
Thanks, Amber. That's a really good question. So Nemko is in the testing, inspection, and certification business. And as Richard said, we're also deemed an essential service. A lot of the products we test, for example, are medical devices, such as respirators. So we all know that there's a big push to get those products to market as quickly as possible. If we've got anybody on the webinar here that's ever been to an EMC lab, I think they'll tell you that their number one criteria when choosing a lab is distance, close proximity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they want to be able to come in and set it up properly and make sure the software is running properly. And more importantly, they want to be able to debug if they have a failure. So I think that's the big missing link right now, is that they're feeling vulnerable because they can't come into the lab. So I guess the biggest thing for us is we're learning to use some of the tools that we've already had in place, but I think most companies are working with more and more. As an example, we could go from something simple to from Skype and Teams meetings with customers to go over schematics and set up documents and stuff like that, where we've also set up mics, speakers, and cameras in the lab so that the client can have a virtual experience. They can actually be there with the test engineer who will walk them through the setup, and they can kind of guide us on how to keep things going. So it's been working out pretty good.
Wonderful. And I know Nemko does a lot more than just the physical testing aspect, but has anything changed with the process around getting to the manufacturing facilities to do inspections? Have you switched to a virtual or witnessing platform, or are your folks still trudging out there and doing those inspections?
So I guess there's a couple of different inspections we do. So when we have to do an inspection of a manufacturing facility for our NRTL mark, our safety mark, for example, that's done up to 4 times a year. Normally, the normal process is to go in and to actually look at the product and the components that are going into it and make sure that everything is kosher. So when we can, we're actually doing that virtually now, either by documentation or using cameras with the customer. But there are some cases where we actually have to physically go in, but then we make sure that we ask all the right questions, and the manufacturing facilities ask us all the right questions as well on precautions to make sure that everyone's safe.
Great. So to you both, Gilles and Rich, are there any lessons learned at this point?
For us, it's been a great opportunity for our team to learn the tools that we already had in place. So, you know, if there's an upside to this, I think COVID gave us the nudge required to enhance our virtual testing services. So, yeah, I think it's, you know, that's the lesson we've learned here.
Awesome. Rich?
Well, I think one of the things that we've learned, and I think we already knew, it just emphasized it, is when you have true partnerships with your customers, you work through things no matter what's thrown at you. And you know, our typical customer has been with us 5-10 years or more, and we have some very strong relationships. And when you have those relationships and know each other so well, it helps get through tough times like this.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of our customers are having the same kind of problems that we are, you know, and we're all in this together. And, you know, the better relationship you have with a customer going into it, the easier it is for us to work through it together.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into my next question. Let's start with Mike and Gilles. When you're working with these companies to help develop and launch their products, it does take a partnership. Have you seen your relationships with your customers change?
Yeah, so the really determined ones haven't changed too much. I think some people have gotten a little more tenacious and a little more aggressive in a good way because of the challenge. And we've also had the opposite happen where projects that we were in the middle of got put on pause, some temporarily, some indefinitely. And, you know, we don't know if we'll hear about those again. But a lot of them are using the opportunity to kind of get their house in order. And we've got a pretty broad service offering. And so it's changed from the work we had been doing for them to things like better visual branding and talking about themselves and creating marketing material and so forth, when we might have been doing some sort of work in designing plastics parts or something. So they shifted focus temporarily, depending on what industry they're in. And then, as I mentioned, some of them, no change whatsoever. People developing medical devices are still doing so. The defense world hasn't changed too much, as you might imagine. So we're still holding steady in a couple of different industries that haven't really been affected in a noticeable way from our end.
Gilles?
Yeah, from our side, I think the word transparency probably addresses this best. So when you don't have the luxury of meeting face to face, you need to find ways to be efficient with your virtual meetings. You need to be transparent so that all parties can communicate openly on facts, and they all know it. So we found our clients have brought in their suppliers, their clients, all of the stakeholders on their side, and we've done the same. We've brought in everyone from the testing, the inspection, and the certification side, so that we can have better planning meetings, and then there's no delays in, you know, having to get back to people. If you can have everybody in the room virtually at the same time, that's been the best thing for us to drive efficiency and, of course, to promote social distancing.
It's a little ironic that your meetings get bigger when they're virtual, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, you think of meetings when you're in an office environment. Yeah, you have a number of meetings in a day, but you think of meetings when you're working from home, for example, and it's nonstop. It's actually pretty amazing how you can fill up to a 12-hour day with back-to-back virtual meetings. So yeah, we've all learned to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from the product design perspective, the meetings get physically larger, maybe because all of the stakeholders need to be involved in the conversations earlier on, because timelines may have shifted and toll gates may have moved. So it seems to be a real versatile process right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I recently spoke to one of RIoT's sponsors who works in the AR, VR software design industry, and he had an interesting story to tell, and I was wondering if there's anyone on our panel today that may have had a similar experience. Because his customers could no longer come to his office to collaborate or see the final product, he ended up ordering a few dozen Oculus glasses to be able to send to his customer preloaded with the product they were buying. So I really thought that was a great way to think outside of the box and how you present yourselves and how your business can kind of flourish in this time. Have any of your companies looked at or maybe implemented some interesting strategies in dealing with your customers?
Well, just like that, we had a project for a park relying on beacons. So, it was a mobile application. As you walk near points of interest in the park, your phone would detect the beacon and, activate the app. And, we ended up ordering beacons to some of our developers to get shipped to them, to some of the park staff to get shipped to them. So, rather than just everyone congregating in our office to work things out, we ended up shipping these beacons all over the place so everyone would get a chance to work with the app and, test it out and have the full experience.
That's great. Do you think, Erin, that maybe will shape the way that Chariot operates once we're sort of back in our new normal?
Yeah, I mean, some parts of this, yes, and some parts of this, no. I think people will be working from home a lot more going forward. We have clients who never really would have considered having staff work from home, and I think that's going to be all different. There are still things, if we get back to a normal and we're all coming into an office, I think it still is going to be more effective to have a group of people working together closely in the office for many things. But it's going to be the balance. If people are able to work remotely and we're able to work that into a process, we'd like to take advantage of that where it makes sense. And if we're able to get back to the office, we'd like to take advantage of that where it makes sense. So trying to take the best of both worlds once we get that opportunity.
This is Rich. We've actually seen some interesting things. We're actually in the process of firing up a new factory in Malaysia, and in the process of getting some individual art productions certified over there that historically would require a visit from the customer to audit it. Now it's being done virtually. And also as far as things like ISO certifications, audits and stuff are being handled remotely. And in the past, that would entail auditors coming into your facility or customers traveling long ways to visit your facilities. And now that's being handled through, WebEx, FaceTime, whatever. And if you told somebody that a year or two ago, they would have thought you were nuts. But that's the reality of the situation that has to happen today. So there's a significant change in that aspect.
For sure. Erin, you said the word efficiency in your answer, and it got me thinking. On the RIoT team, anyways, we certainly aren't producing physical products or software products, but working from home, we're all sort of in the same boat where we feel like our efficiency isn't quite what it was when we were in the office and having that direct interaction. Are any of you guys seeing, or are you willing to comment on how does that product design cycle look now? Is it more efficient because people are working from home? Is it less efficient? Have we cut down on the time that it takes to get to market because everyone is maybe a bit more collaborative?
I mean, I'll give you the consultant's answer. It depends. As I said early on, I think the design phase of a project can be more challenging. There are times when you really want just, a business stakeholder to sit down with you and look at your screen and, spend 5 minutes saying, am I on the right track here? And yeah, you can set up a WebEx for that, but Some of these things, there's just overhead and delay, that's different than if someone's right down the hall from you. But on the other hand, if you're trying to, be effective as a software developer, if you can be heads down without distraction in your home office, you might get a lot more done than if there's always people stopping by to chat or asking to, go out to coffee or something. Like there are some parts of this that I think you can be much more effective at, and some parts of it that are a little more challenging. So, again, I'd like to say, using my crystal ball in the future, we'll have learned some things and we'll be able to better take advantage of what we've learned and maybe, make the best of working remotely where that's going to give an advantage and make the best of working in the office where that's going to give an advantage.
Actually, I can add on to that, Amber. Erin, you were mentioning, people working from home more and more. So I've got one employee in particular who, I always wanted to work from home. I kept pushing him. He had a long drive every day. I said, work from home, you'll be much more efficient. You'll get a lot more work done in the same amount of time. And he just didn't see it. And, he couldn't see himself getting motivated to get up in the morning and actually work from home and stuff. Since this outbreak, he has been working from home, obviously, and he loves it. And I can guarantee, even if I want him to come back to the office, I know I'm going to have a hard time bringing him back. And I can actually see the productivity levels change immensely. So I hope people are going to embrace it, and I hope employers are going to embrace it, especially, and give the trust to the people that are working from home that, they are actually doing probably more work from home than they were when they were sitting in the office.
Erin, I think, brought up a good point. It really does depend. In my organization, I have software developers, hardware developers, firmware people, production people, sales and marketing people. And some of those roles, especially the software, is very effective. But when it comes to manufacturing, that doesn't work. So it really does depend, and it creates, and it also creates and I don't mean this. I've always I'm trying to prevent this because I have all those functions within the organization. You got to be careful that it doesn't create a two-class system where some people don't have to come into work and work from home and others do. And you got to deal with that also, especially when you're an essential business. But it really does depend. That's probably the best answer I've heard.
I would agree with that as well. A lot of the basic, hardware software development definitely it's going to be a little more efficient. People don't have to commute and things like that. But lots of other things get more time consuming, trying to get ahead of problems, plan ahead, even just simple stuff like where to ship things. So we had a board arrive today, it'll arrive at the office sometime before noon. It was pretty easy for that board to come in, and the 3 or 4 people who needed to load code on 2 different processors and bring that board up to kind of powwow as and when necessary. Instead, we have to, juggle about who will be here to receive it, what are the steps going to be explicitly, and how do we hand off various things that we might have done in a much more collaborative point of view. So lots of time goes into those planning activities.
It kind of multiplies or accentuates the one of the basic challenges we have with IoT devices, and that's what we're all on this call about. Is IoT devices are a combination of hardware and software by definition, and just that combination alone complicates things. Whereas if you're just working on a software package and you don't have to worry about hardware, it's a much simpler proposition. But now you add what we're dealing with right now to that two combination, and it's I always like to use the story. When I went from 1 child to 2 child, it was like going from 1 to 4 because you get the interactions. So now we've gone from 1 to 2, 1 to 4 to maybe 1 to 9 with the complexities of what we're dealing with. So.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of along those same lines, for me anyway, in RIoT's ecosystem, I'm seeing a lot more honest and frank conversations. Chris, Erin, Rich, how about you? Have your customer relationships been altered during the last few months, or have they become more or less efficient?
So it definitely changed some. Most of our customers are remote, so in some ways it's the same. It's just we're all dialing into that call remotely. But absolutely, there have been some changes in the dynamics with everyone. First of all, to some extent, everybody's suffering through this together. And it's a new paradigm, and they're a little bit eager to share both what's working and not working and kind of bond over that mutual experience. So that's been something everybody's been working out. And we work with a lot of field engineers who normally travel 80% of the time. So it's interesting to talk to them and see how their lives are changing, working from home all the time. And of course, all the intrusions from dogs and kids or neighbors more, animals next door or something. It's just part of the whole challenge and atmosphere, and something everybody's enjoyed a little bit. On the engineers and suppliers, I think you heard the same thing here today. A lot of people seem busier than they were before. I think most people would agree with that. Partly because the opportunity to get more done, you're taking tasks off the backlog list and getting them done, but also the overhead of queuing everything up and keeping everybody busy and responding to every bump in the road that comes up remotely. I see that almost everybody, vendors and partners, are busier than they have been before. And a lot of that comes to that additional effort and the opportunity to get more done. But most of our customers are continuing to move forward, quite a few initiating new work. And some of that is work that we might not have otherwise had the opportunity to do. Several sort of large industrial customers, their factories are shut down, their teams are furloughed. So they're asking if we can keep the ball rolling in several cases. And that's been very good for us, obviously.
Do you think that sense of urgency is driving products to be a faster design cycle and a faster get to market cycle?
We're definitely not seeing that they have necessarily a faster cycle time. They're eager to make progress and keep up the old schedule. Mm-hmm. Most of our customers are not in any kind of medical device that would be kind of urgently needed, but everybody wants to not drop the ball and not lose time over this whole period at the very least.
At the same time, one of the many projects we worked on was to let doctors and nurses order lunch in from the hospital, and that was incredibly time sensitive. So that that there was all kinds of urgency around that. On the other hand, some of the long running projects, it's really no different. But I think a lot of us have enjoyed talking to people and seeing them in their home or their native environment, their digs, and it's easier to see the people you're working with as human beings. They're not just a developer or a stakeholder or whatever, but they're a person in an office, in a home office, or with kids or whatever. So I think it has made conversations a little more frank and made the people you're collaborating with a little more human as you move through this.
Yeah,
I think from our manufacturing side, where we have very long-term customers, it's generally just strengthened relationship, and because there's a recognition that we're all in the same boat, and based on those relationships, it just strengthened them. From our product development side, one of the things I don't know if anybody else on this call has seen this, but we were actually in the middle of a launch of the new product, and there was a period of about a month or so that everybody, I think some of the customers that we were launching to, there was a little bit of shock, and it was difficult for people. When people deploy IoT products, they have to think differently. It's new ways of doing business at times. And when people were kind of in this initial shock mode, it was difficult to get new products to the market and people adopt them, because the last thing that was on people's mind is adopting a new way of doing business or a new product. In the last couple of weeks, I've sensed that we're coming out of that. People have realized, well, we got to move on. move forward with life and creativity and new efficient products. So I'm not sure that was quite an answer to your question, but that's one of the things we've noticed from our product development side.
I should also give a counterexample. We have one product aimed at the hotel industry to use IoT devices to help them reduce water usage. So on the one hand, that industry is a disaster right now, and this product may never make it to market. But on the other hand, they have a good pitch for the moment because it's a money-saving device. So if they're ever going to get any software or any hardware into the hotel industry right now, that might be the one. So it's changed the conversation around that particular device. Still not clear yet whether it's going to make it or not, but I guess we'll see.
So the participants on this call come from varying backgrounds and job responsibilities. We can assume that some of them do come from companies and corporations who are still trying to get their products out to market. I'd like to ask all of you to maybe give some advice around best practices during this crisis in about 10 words or less. Rich?
Wow.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah. Well, one of the products we're actually introducing will minimize the need to go out and visit customers and interact with people. And maybe that's a potential angle to play, but that's a tough question. I'm not sure exactly how to answer that.
No, that's fair. How about Chris? What's your best advice?
I think right now in these kind of challenging times, first and foremost, safety is really important. So we've taken steps to schedule who's in the office and when, and even be able to track that in case we ever need to. And without the team healthy, obviously can't do any of the work. And then to complement that, the executive teams and project managers were working really aggressively to try to get ahead of the curve and anticipate problems. We have the right software ready when those boards show up later today, and who might need to be in the office and how can they work together. Maybe the software guy can stay remote. The hardware guy comes in to use the temperature chamber and they use Zoom or whatever to conference. So really that planning and communications, daily communications, is a huge part of it.
Nice. Rich?
The main things.
That's great. Mike, let's go to you.
Sure. So I think to piggyback on what Chris was saying, anticipating issues with logistics before they happen. So knowing that you're going to schedule a Zoom meeting, somebody's going to show up late, they're going to have to fight with their microphone, they're going to get started late, they're going to be behind on email because everything's over email right now, and a material that was supposed to arrive is diverted or that's being used for something else, or a facility shut down, there's nobody in the office to receive a package. So that's part of it, is just looking ahead. And then I think don't underestimate the value of visual storytelling, because everything's done virtually. Love it or hate it, people don't really love to read, especially when they're required to read emails and things all day. So make your material more compelling wherever you have an opportunity. Convert a bulleted list into a cool infographic or something, and do a better job getting people's attention. And then also we've been doing this too, which is use the opportunity to kind of get your house in order and organize your files and make sure that all of your documentation's up to date. Or if you've been meaning to fix a leak in the roof, go ahead and do it when there aren't people in the building and things like that.
Yeah, that is really good advice. How about you, Erin?
I'd just say communication. I'm going to go for the under 10 words.
All right, Gilles, you're up.
All right, well, I'll make up for the 10 words. How's that? So for us, if you're going into a test lab, be prepared to support that testing remotely. Build some software into there so that you can dial into your product, see what's happening during the testing. On our side, we've had to get our IT department involved now, because sometimes we need to get around our firewall, for example, so that people can directly connect. So just be prepared to be flexible. And last thing on that side, our test engineers have to be in the lab. They have no choice. That's where the testing is done. So we work shifts because we don't want everybody in the lab at the same time. So if you have flexibility to work an evening, for example, and support some testing, that can go a long way with your lab as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for your insights. This has been a great discussion. At this time, I'd like to open it up to audience questions. Caroline, I know you've been monitoring the chat window. What questions do we have?
Thanks, Amber. This question is directed towards any of our panelists, so feel free to answer. Are any of you seeing design teams start to shift away from physical prototyping and lean in much more to simulation?
We're seeing the opposite, for whatever that's worth. We're seeing people want things made quickly and shipped as quickly as possible, arriving at their house. So we have been pulled away from a lot of what would have been done via simulation in order to get people hands-on objects because they can't physically come here to see them.
We're very much in the middle of kind of building a bunch of things that were already pretty well defined. So wasn't a lot of opportunity to simulate that, but I could see if you were designing a system, you know, coming out with a whole new end-to-end product with beacons and everything, there may well be some ways that you could shift even the high-level design to a simulation web experience or something for testing and evaluating.
Yeah, in our experience, nothing, simulation may be nice, but nothing replaces actual product testing.
Yeah, and that's why we were shipping beacons around. You know, we can show someone a simulation of an app running on a phone and say, and here's what would happen if you walk past a beacon. But that's not the same experience as, you know, someone putting a beacon in the next room and walking around their house and seeing how their phone actually reacts. So, you know, there's a place for simulation, but it's hard to beat the real thing.
Thanks, guys. A related question, are there cases where simulated testing is acceptable as a replacement for real testing from a regulatory point of view?
Maybe I can take that one on. So from a regulatory point of view, especially if we're looking at EMC testing, for example, we have to test a real product. We have to see what this product is emitting and make sure that it's within the limits of the standard that we're testing against. So a simulated test, doing that in a simulated way, maybe for engineering purposes, possibly, maybe for electrical safety, you know, looking at not even a prototype, looking at maybe some documentation first before the product is actually developed. So maybe some pre-evaluation services.
Great, thank you so much. Next question, for the design work, when whiteboarding may have been the common approach in person, what tools are each of you using?
Yeah, so we do a lot of annotation on Zoom calls, and it's kind of funny because some of the pressure sensitive tablet equipment that we use allows you to draw on screen. So we're doing like really, really over the top good Zoom annotation in some cases. And we've got limited tools, but that's still been kind of fun for an industry that's built on drawing things. And then just a lot of quick like thumbnail pictures, you know, cell phone picture, text each other kind of thing, just to keep as much of that face-to-face as we can.
Yeah, we have not really shifted to any new tools. We already do a lot of shared files and things like that. So it's pretty easy to pull them up or do a shared screen and just say, what if we move this here? What if we move that there? And work it out pretty quickly. You don't have to sketch nearly as much as Michael does.
Yeah, for us, it's been mostly Teams. Teams is what we use internally for our internal meetings. And when we're working with clients, we're flexible to whatever, but for the most part, Teams or Skype seems to work.
As the manufacturing representative, there's no simulation to manufacturing.
Thanks, guys. That's really helpful. Has remote access changed any of your security practices?
Not really for us.
We were already pretty enabled like Michael, so it was just telling people to not come in and then try to coordinate all the other bits that needed to be done.
Not for us either.
I think we were pretty well set up going into it. It's just a question of how heavily these remote access tools and secure networks are being relied on, whereas before the load wasn't as much.
Yeah, same with us. We were pretty much set up for remote access. I think the biggest change for us is that there are people using remote access now that never did in the past. So it was more of a training thing, getting them used to what they need to do when they're from home.
Great, thanks, guys. Next question. How has supply chain affected each of you?
We've run into a few issues where materials we were already ordering, because a lot of our vendors are raw material suppliers and are considered essential and are still open. Like I mentioned earlier, diverting that material for use in everything from ventilators to face shields to whatever. So we have seen hit pretty close to home the need to change materials due to just lack of supply. So that's been part of it. And then anytime you've got teams working remotely in an otherwise manufacturing or production based environment, it's just a slower response and you just kind of more patience required across the board. But at the same time, everyone's expecting that. And so everybody's pretty understanding.
Yeah, we've definitely had to shift. In one case, we changed our plan. We were going to build roughly 100 prototypes, but we can't get the non-contact infrared thermometers. So we had 5 left over and we built 10 prototypes, 5 with and without, and we'll bring up those boards and debug all that now and see what we can do in the meantime to either get that part or find a substitute. It's an ongoing challenge, and I suspect there'll continue to be others like that.
Yeah, the only example I can point to from manufacturing, there was an instance where a part was needed. It was a medical part that it was spec'd in a way that it required a very particular material rather than an IPC slash sheet that's needed for flex circuit materials. It called out a very specific manufacturer and stuff, which is not the right way to do it, but that's how it went through the FDA or approval process. And because of the need for the product, there was some common sense waivers given where that overcame some of that specific. It shouldn't have been there to begin with, quite frankly. So it's allowed for a little bit of relaxation of specifications. And I think it's interesting. You've kind of seen that on a medicinal level too. So the FDA process can be pretty rigorous, we'll put it. And, it's got a little bit more flexible with some components that go into medical equipment too.
Yeah, what we found is that the orders are stacking up. We've got a lot of orders, booked orders for testing to be done, but no samples available to test because of lack of components. So in the last couple of weeks, I have to say it's getting better. I think our clients seem to be getting access to components a little more from the Far East now. So hopefully things are going to keep improving on that front.
Great, thank you, guys. Next question. Are there ways to cut down the time from each of your perspectives to get a product to market?
The easy one is to not change the requirements, right? That would always help a lot of us.
Or to look at what is really necessary for an MVP release, a minimum viable product. Like what can you cut out of scope rather than adding more into scope?
Stick to it.
From the testing point of view, source components that are already approved, especially on the electrical safety side, that helps a lot. Maybe do some pre-compliance testing on a prototype before you go to full manufacturing. Make sure that you're not going to have any emissions problems, for example, when you go into formal testing. Yeah, try to plan much in advance as you can.
From our perspective, from the manufacturing side of things, which is typically, metal, plastic components, flexible printed circuit boards, getting us involved as early as possible in the design cycle so that we can make sure, for example, the flex circuit that was designed is designed well and manufacturable. So getting us involved as early as possible tends to help.
If you don't design for EMC and all the related safety testing and don't design for manufacturability, you won't be done when you think you're done, because you'll definitely go to the CM and to the labs and maybe find yourself almost starting over to meet all the requirements.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, harder to do in today's environment. So.
We've definitely had customers refer to us because they were failing in the lab. While we didn't start over, it was another several board spins to fix everything and get them ready to go.
If a ferrite doesn't fix it, it's probably going to be an expensive fix.
Yes.
Thanks so much, guys. That is all the questions that I am seeing. So thank you for answering all of those. I will let Amber, I'll turn it over to Amber Cobb. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks again, everyone. If you think of a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, please feel free to reach out to me, amber@riot.org, and I'll be happy to put you in touch with our phenomenal panelists. Thank you, Rich, Chris, Erin, Gilles, Michael, for sharing your unique perspectives and experiences. And thank you to our attendees for joining us. Remember to make sure you're signed up for the Riot newsletter and our meetup groups, and please follow us on social media. Stay safe and sane, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just have to note that 4 out of our 5 panelists are Riot sponsors, so it's pretty awesome. Thanks for being here, guys.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I'm glad to do it. Appreciate the opportunity.